There's squatter.
Officer, I'm a licensed real estate agent. This is a scheduled showing.
Step outside. Now.
Verify the lockbox log. This is an active listing.
The first word hit the foyer like a slap. Squatter! Officer Ryan Kessler didn't whisper it. He didn't soften it. He said it loud enough for the couple in the living room to hear, loud enough for the echo in the empty house to carry it up the staircase. Aisha Grant froze with the lockbox key still in her hand. She was standing on hardwood floors that had been polished for sale, under a chandelier that had been chosen to look timeless, wearing a blazer and low heels, because this was a showing, not a street corner. Her business card was in her pocket. Her real estate license was on her phone. The listing agreement was in her email. The code she'd used on the lockbox was logged, time-stamped, and authorized. None of it mattered to Kessler in that moment. "You can't just break into a vacant house and pretend you belong," he said, stepping deeper into the foyer as if he owned the air. Aisha's clients, Evan and Marissa Doyle, stood near the kitchen island, mid-conversation about countertops. Marissa's smile disappeared. Evan's hands lifted slightly, instinctively, like he was trying to show he wasn't part of a problem. Aisha swallowed once. "Officer," she said, calm and clear, "I'm a licensed real estate agent. I'm here for a scheduled showing. This is an active listing." Kessler's eyes flicked over her like he was reading a lie off her skin. "Sure," he said, "and I'm the mayor." Then he pointed toward the front door. "Step outside, now." Aisha didn't move, not because she wanted a fight, because her mind had already leapt ahead to the fallout. The body camera on his chest was blinking red. The home's entry camera, installed by the seller's property manager, was recording from above the door, and the number she would hear months later, $1.6 million, was still just a future headline, a lesson the university's partner city would learn the hard way. But right now, all she could hear was her own heartbeat, steady and controlled, while a police officer stood in the entrance of a home she was legally showing and called her something that was designed to erase her: squatter. And if you're wondering how a single word in a quiet foyer can turn into a $1.6 million payout, here's the answer. Because that word wasn't confusion. It was certainty. And certainty, when it's recorded, becomes evidence. Rewind. To the morning Aisha Grant woke up believing the hardest part of her day would be closing a deal. Aisha was 35. A black woman who built her career the way most people build anything lasting, slowly, stubbornly, and with more self-control than the world ever demanded from anyone else. She didn't inherit a client list. She didn't have a family friend in a brokerage handing her leads. She started in a rented apartment with a laptop that overheated and a phone that never stopped buzzing because she made it buzz. Her mother had been a postal worker. Her father drove trucks. They taught her that money is real, not romantic, that contracts matter, that people smile when they want something, that you should always read what you sign. Aisha took those lessons into real estate. She was good at it, not because she talked fast, but because she listened harder than most people. She learned how to translate a buyer's "I like it" into the real question: can I live here without feeling trapped? She learned how to walk a nervous couple through interest rates without making them feel dumb. She learned how to negotiate without making the room hate her for winning. And she learned something else, quietly, over years of showings. The same exact outfit that made a white agent look professional could make a black agent look suspicious, depending on the neighborhood. Aisha didn't say that out loud much. She didn't want her life to be a complaint. She wanted it to be a business, but she never forgot it. The listing that set everything off was 112 Aldercrest Drive, a 2-story home in Cedar Ridge, a neighborhood of clean sidewalks and deliberate quiet, mature trees, trim lawns, a place where the mailboxes matched because the HOA liked order. The home itself had been staged to feel safe. Neutral paint, soft lighting, a bowl of fake lemons on the kitchen island because someone had decided lemons signal freshness. It was vacant, yes, but vacant doesn't mean abandoned. It means on the market. The seller was out of state, a relocation situation. The property manager handled access. The showings were logged through a digital lockbox system that tracked every entry, every code, every time the door opened. Aisha had a 4:30 p.m. appointment with the Doyles. Evan was an accountant. Marissa worked in pediatric therapy. They were the kind of clients agents like, decisive, realistic, not looking for a fairy tale, just a home. They'd toured 3 places already. 2 were wrong. This one felt promising. Aisha arrived at 4:18, parked across the street, and did what she always did. She walked the exterior first, not for aesthetics, for safety, because empty houses come with surprises, loose steps, sticking locks, the occasional neighbor who thinks their opinion is part of the sale. She checked the lockbox on the handle. It was new, digital, the kind that beeps softly when you punch in the code. She entered her credentials. Beep, green. The box clicked open. Aisha pulled the key, unlocked the door, and stepped inside with the practiced posture of someone who has done this 1,000 times. And across the street, behind a curtain, someone watched her like she was stealing daylight. The neighbor's name was Brenda Halcombe, 62, retired, the kind of woman who knew every car that belonged on the block and treated unfamiliar ones like a threat. Brenda didn't like the home being vacant. Vacant meant strangers. Strangers meant noise. Noise meant change. And change, to Brenda, always felt like loss. She'd seen the "for sale" sign go up 2 months earlier. She'd read the neighborhood group chat messages about open houses bringing outsiders. She'd commented on a thread about security concerns and told everyone they needed to be vigilant. When she saw Aisha park and walk up to the house with confidence, she didn't think, "That's the agent." She thought, "Who is that?" And in her mind, the answer formed before any facts arrived. She dialed 911, not screaming, not frantic, calm, the most dangerous kind of calm. "There's someone entering the vacant house on Alder Crest," she said. "I think it's a squatter." Dispatch asked questions. Did she see forced entry? "No," Brenda admitted. "Did she see a weapon?" "No." "Did she see property damage?" "No." "Then why do you think it's a squatter?" Brenda paused and filled the pause with the only thing she had. "I don't recognize her," she said. "She doesn't look like she belongs here." And that sentence, "doesn't look like she belongs," turned into a code in a computer. Possible trespass, possible burglary. Unit dispatched. Officer Ryan Kessler responded. 29, 2.5 years on the job. Still new enough to want the rush, still old enough to believe he already had instincts worth trusting. He'd recently been assigned to a property crime detail after a few high-profile squatter cases made local news. Vacant houses, stolen copper, people living in places they didn't own. Stories that politicians loved because they made fear easy. Kessler had been briefed on vacant property incidents. He'd been told to be proactive, and somewhere inside his brain, proactive had become suspicious. He rolled into Cedar Ridge at 4:34 with no lights, no siren, just a slow, confident crawl down the street. He spotted Aisha's car, out-of-state plates on one vehicle, a second car behind it, Evan and Marissa's, 2 cars on a quiet street, a house with a sign, a person inside. In Kessler's mind, the story clicked into place. He parked at the curb, got out, and walked straight to the front door, not to knock politely, to take control. Inside, Aisha was doing what agents do, opening blinds, turning on lights, letting the house feel lived in for people who were trying to picture their future. Evan and Marissa followed her from room to room. "This is a good layout," Evan said. Marissa smiled at the upstairs bathroom. "I like the natural light." Aisha nodded. "The staging team did a good job, but the bones are what matter. Check the closet space." She was mid-sentence when she heard the front door open behind her. No knock, no announcement. Just the sound of a door swinging and a heavier set of footsteps entering a home like permission was assumed. Aisha turned. Officer Kessler stood in the foyer, hand near his belt, eyes scanning. "Who are you?" he demanded. Aisha blinked. "Excuse me?" she said, more surprised than scared, at first. Kessler pointed toward her. "Who are you and what are you doing in this house?" he repeated. Aisha lifted her chin. "I'm the listing agent," she said. "I'm conducting a showing." Kessler's eyes narrowed. "You have permission to be here?" he asked, like permission was a suspicious concept. "Yes," Aisha said. "This is an active listing. The lockbox is authorized." Kessler looked past her into the house, then back. "Step outside," he said. Aisha's stomach tightened. "Officer," she replied carefully, "this is a real estate showing. I can show you my license and the showing confirmation." Kessler's voice sharpened. "Don't argue. Step outside." Evan and Marissa exchanged a look, confusion turning into alarm. Evan spoke up, cautious. "Officer, we're buyers," he said. "We're here with her. She opened the lockbox." Kessler snapped his head toward Evan. "Stay back," he barked. Then, without lowering his voice, he said the word. "Squatter." It wasn't just an accusation, it was a label that turns a person into a problem before you ever check facts. Aisha felt it hit her chest like a weight. She kept her hands visible. She kept her voice level, because she'd learned, the hard way, that being right doesn't keep you safe. "Officer," she said, "I am not leaving this property until you verify. You entered without consent. This is my scheduled appointment." Kessler stepped closer. "You entered without consent," he repeated, mocking her. Then he looked at her bag. "What's in there?" he asked. "A laptop," Aisha said. "Contracts, my work." "Open it," Kessler demanded. Aisha stared. "You don't have probable cause to search my bag," she said calmly, and in that moment the temperature changed, because Kessler didn't hear probable cause as a legal term. He heard it as a challenge. "You want to be difficult?" he snapped. "Fine, turn around." Aisha's heart thudded once, hard. "Are you detaining me?" she asked. Kessler's jaw tightened. "You're being detained for investigation," he said. "Investigation of what?" Aisha looked past him and saw the blinking little lens above the door, the property manager's camera. She made a decision, not to argue feelings, to narrate facts. "For the record," Aisha said clearly, "I am Aisha Grant, a licensed real estate agent. I have legal access through a lockbox. You entered this home without knocking and are calling me a squatter. I am requesting you verify through dispatch or the listing office." Kessler flinched. People flinch when you turn their authority into a record. "Don't talk like that," he snapped. "Stop filming." "I'm not filming," Aisha replied. "Your body camera is." Evan whispered, "This is insane." Marissa's face was pale. Kessler's eyes darted toward the couple. "Both of you," he said. "Get out, now." Evan hesitated. "We're not doing anything," he said. Kessler stepped toward him. "I said out," he barked. Marissa grabbed Evan's arm and pulled him back toward the kitchen. Aisha stayed in place, because she knew if she moved the wrong way, the story would shift, and she knew something else. Once you're labeled, everything you do becomes suspicious. Kessler reached for his radio. "Dispatch," he said. I've got a female inside the vacant residence on Alder Crest. Claims she's a realtor, requesting backup, possible squatter situation. Aisha's jaw tightened. Vacant residence was technically true. It was also misleading. Vacant doesn't mean unlawful, but language isn't chosen for precision in moments like this. It's chosen for authority. Aisha kept her voice steady. Officer, she said, scan the lockbox. The system logs entry. Call the listing brokerage. Verify. This is verifiable in 2 minutes. Kessler's eyes narrowed. You're not telling me how to do my job, he snapped. I'm telling you how to verify, Aisha replied. Kessler's hand drifted toward his cuffs. Last warning, he said. Step outside or you'll be removed. Removed from a house she was legally in front of clients, on camera. Aisha felt her pulse in her throat. She spoke again, quieter but sharper. If you put hands on me, she said, you're going to make this a lawsuit. Kessler's mouth curled. You think I'm scared of a lawsuit? He said. And just like that, the open loop snapped into place. Because later, when the university and the city both wrote checks, this would be one of the lines attorneys circled in red. Not because it was dramatic, because it revealed mindset. Backup arrived at 4:43. Officer Lila Moreno, senior patrol, calm eyes, no theatrics. She stepped into the foyer, took in Aisha's blazer, the client's presence, the staged home, the lockbox key still in Aisha's hand. She didn't see a squatter, she saw a mess. What's going on? Moreno asked. Kessler launched into his narrative. Neighbor called, he said. Vacant home, female inside, claims she's realtor, refusing to step out. Moreno looked at Aisha. Ma'am, she said, what's your name? Aisha answered calmly. Aisha Grant, real estate agent, scheduled showing. Here's my lockbox key. Moreno's eyes flicked to the lockbox. Then she did the simplest thing in the world. She asked for verification. Do you have your license? She asked. Aisha nodded. It's in my phone wallet, she said, and in my bag. You told me not to reach. Moreno glanced at Kessler. Kessler looked away. Moreno exhaled. Okay, she said. Slowly, show me your ID. Aisha retrieved her phone and pulled up her license, her photo, her name, her brokerage, her license number. Moreno looked at it, then looked at Aisha. Then she turned to Kessler. Why didn't you just verify? She asked quietly. Kessler's jaw clenched. Could be fake, he muttered. Moreno didn't argue. She walked to the front door and looked at the lockbox. The lockbox had a brand name on it, a model number, a little Bluetooth symbol. Moreno knew these. Most cops do, because they're common. She pulled out her own phone, opened an app used for property verification, provided through a partnership with the county assessor, and scanned the lockbox's QR code. A log popped up. Authorized entry. Aisha Grant, 4:21 p.m. Moreno's eyes narrowed. That was it. That beep. That digital confirmation. The entire story collapsed. Moreno turned back. Kessler, she said, voice. Firm now. She's authorized. Stand down. Kessler didn't move immediately. Ego hates collapse. Moreno repeated it. Stand down. Now. Kessler stepped back stiff. Aisha exhaled. Not relief, release. Moreno looked at Aisha. I apologize, she said. Aisha's voice stayed steady, but her eyes were hard. Officer, she said. He called me a squatter. He entered without knocking. He threatened to remove me in front of my clients. Moreno's jaw tightened. She looked at Kessler again. Kessler, she said. Step outside. Kessler bristled, but he left the foyer. Outside, the neighborhood had become an audience. Brenda Halcombe stood across the street with her arms crossed, pretending she was just watching the weather. A few doors down, someone had their phone up. The property manager's camera kept blinking. Evan and Marissa stood in the kitchen, shaken. Marissa whispered, "I don't want to buy here." That sentence would haunt Aisha later, not because the house was bad, because the neighborhood had revealed itself. Kessler's voice was low outside, but still recorded. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Moreno's voice didn't rise. "You walked into a listing and called a licensed agent a squatter," she said. "That's not ridiculous. That's liability." Kessler scoffed. "She didn't look like—" he started. Moreno cut him off. "Finish that sentence," she said. Kessler shut his mouth, because he knew, because cameras were everywhere, and because the thing he was thinking had no safe version out loud. Moreno pointed toward Brenda. "Who called?" she asked. Brenda lifted her chin. "I did," she said. "That house is vacant. I didn't recognize her." Moreno's eyes narrowed. "Not recognizing someone isn't a crime," she said. Brenda's lips tightened. "You can't be too careful," she replied. Moreno's voice went flat. "Be careful. With 9/11, she said. "It's not a neighborhood tool." Brenda looked away. Kessler stared at the ground, and Aisha stood in the doorway of the home she had entered legally, feeling the thin line between normal work and public humiliation. The showing ended early, not because the Doyles didn't like the house, because the moment had poisoned it. Evan apologized to Aisha in the driveway, voice awkward. "I'm sorry," he said. "That shouldn't have happened." Marissa's eyes were wet. "I don't feel safe in this neighborhood," she whispered. Aisha nodded, because she understood. She didn't blame them. This wasn't about preference. It was about belonging, and belonging had just been questioned at gunbelt range. Aisha got in her car and sat for a moment with the engine off. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not because she was weak, because her body had done what bodies do after danger. Adrenaline left and left behind, shaking. She drove back to her office and did what professionals do when they know a record is the only protection. She documented time, location, names. She emailed her broker. She requested the Bodycam through public records. She asked the property manager for the entry camera footage. She saved the Lockbox log, because she understood something. If you don't write the story, someone else will, and their story will call you a squatter again, just with nicer words. The city's initial statement was predictable. Officers responded to a call. An individual was briefly detained for verification. No arrest occurred. They used small words to shrink big harm. Briefly, verification, no arrest. But Aisha's attorney, because yes, she hired one, didn't argue in adjectives. He argued in seconds. He argued in video. He argued in the moment Kessler entered without knocking, the moment he called her a squatter, the moment he refused to verify, the moment he threatened removal, the moment Moreno scanned the lockbox and ended the entire investigation with a beep. That beep was lethal to the city's defense, because it proved verification was available and ignored. Here's the twist that turned a humiliating encounter into a $1.6 million lesson. The lockbox wasn't just a key holder, it was a witness. It recorded every access attempt, every successful entry, every time the door was opened. And when Aisha's attorney subpoenaed the full log history, it revealed something the city didn't expect. Kessler had encountered that same lockbox system before, 3 times in the prior 6 months. 3 calls labeled possible squatter at vacant listings. 3 times, the lockbox showed authorized entry by licensed agents. 3 times, Kessler's reports used the same language. Subject refused to comply. Claimed to be a realtor. Vacant property. 3 times the Tisiandis verification came after escalation, not before. That wasn't bad luck. That was pattern. and patterns are what juries punish, because patterns tell you the problem isn't one moment, it's a habit. Discovery made it worse. Internal emails from the department showed supervisors had received complaints from local brokers. Not dramatic complaints, quiet ones. Your officer is entering listings without knocking. Your officer is detaining agents during showings. Our clients are being frightened. One email from a brokerage owner used the exact phrase, "He keeps calling our agents squatters." The department's reply had been soft. "We'll address it through training." Training. The word institutions use when they don't want to admit misconduct. But now, with Aisha's footage and the Lockbox logs, training wasn't enough, because the case wasn't only about humiliation, it was about economic harm. Aisha lost the Doyles as clients, not because she failed, because the neighborhood and the officer made them feel unsafe. She lost potential referrals, she lost time, she lost reputation in a space where whispers travel faster than facts, and on top of that, she had emotional distress, documented by her therapist, because the incident rewired how she felt at work. Every showing became a question. Will someone call? Will someone decide I don't belong? Will a uniform treat my keys like a crime? That is harm, and courts recognize harm when it's supported. The city tried to shift blame. They said the neighbor's call created reasonable suspicion. They said vacant homes are targets. They said officers have to be careful. Aisha's attorney asked a simple question. Careful looks like verification. Why didn't he verify? And a second question. If you had time to enter the house, order her out, threaten to remove her, and call for backup, why didn't you have time to scan the lockbox first? Silence in deposition is loud, because there is no good answer. The answer, the real answer, is the one Kessler almost said, outside. She didn't look like... And that unfinished sentence did more damage than any shouted accusation. As the lawsuit moved forward, the university got pulled in. Not because the university owned the house, because the university police department and city police shared mutual aid and training resources in Cedar Ridge, and Kessler's supervisor had been part of a joint vacant property initiative hosted on campus. Emails showed the initiative had emphasized squatter removals without building in safeguards against profiling. It wasn't explicit racism. It didn't need to be. It was permission. Permission to treat vacancy as crime. Permission to treat unfamiliar as threat. And permission is dangerous when bias is already present. The city and university both realized something. A trial would be ugly. Not because the facts were unclear, because the facts were clear, and clear facts are the worst kind for institutions. They remove the fog you hide in. Negotiations accelerated. The city offered a quiet number. Aisha declined, not because she wanted a jackpot, because she wanted change. She wanted policy adjustments. She wanted a directive that officers must verify lockbox logs or property manager confirmation before detaining anyone at an active listing. She wanted training that addressed bias in belongs here calls, and she wanted an acknowledgement that calling her a squatter was defamatory and dangerous, because in America, squatter isn't just an insult. It's a justification. It's a word that tells people you're disposable. Eventually, the settlement arrived. $1.6 million. Quietly. No admission. No grand apology on the news. The usual language about resolving claims. But the settlement terms mattered. New protocols for Itoiwan's vacant property calls. Mandatory verification steps before entry or detention at listings. Bodycam audits triggered by certain language. A revised policy for responding to suspicious person, calls rooted in I don't recognize them, and a disciplinary action for Kessler, including removal from the property crime detail and a sustained finding related to improper detention and unprofessional conduct. In plain language, The city learned an expensive lesson, that you don't belong is not law, and squatter is not a substitute for verification. Aisha didn't quit. That matters, because the easiest victory for a system that humiliates you is your disappearance. If you leave the profession, the story ends quietly. If you stop showing houses in neighborhoods like Cedar Ridge, the neighborhood gets to keep its gate. Aisha refused, but she changed, not into paranoia, into precision. She started sending showing confirmations to clients in advance, with clear instructions. If anyone approaches, stay calm, let me handle it, keep your phone ready. She started wearing a discreet bodycam of her own, legal in her state, with clear signage and consent language in her client agreements. She started pulling up Lockbox logs before she even entered a property, saving screenshots like armor, and she started doing something that says everything about what these incidents do to a person. She started scanning the street before she stepped out of her car, not for buyers, for watchers. Months after the settlement, Aisha drove past 112 Aldercrest Drive and saw a "sold" sign planted in the yard. Not because Cedar Ridge had become welcoming, because the market doesn't care about shame, but Aisha did. She parked for a moment and looked at the house, at the front door, at the camera above it, at the place where she'd been called a squatter in a foyer that smelled like fresh paint and staged lemons. And she felt something complicated, not triumph, not closure, a reminder that belonging, for some people, is always conditional until you force someone to verify. If you've ever been questioned in a place you had every legal right to be, you already know the feeling Aisha carried out of that house, and if you're comfortable sharing it, ask yourself, what did it cost you? Time, dignity, opportunity, peace. Because the cost isn't always a lawsuit. Sometimes it's a small retreat, a different route, a different neighborhood, a different dream. In the end, the city paid $1.6 million. The university wrote policy updates. The department changed procedures. But the most important thing wasn't the check. It was the record. The Lockbox log that didn't lie. The bodycam that captured the word squatter. The backup officer's beep that proved verification was easy. And the quiet truth that sits underneath all of it. When authority treats your presence like a crime, your credentials become negotiable. Unless you document, unless you insist, unless you refuse to let someone else's certainty rewrite your reality. Aisha Grant walked into a house with a key that proved she belonged. A cop called her a squatter anyway. And once that moment was recorded, the city learned what it should have known before it ever crossed the threshold. You don't get to police belonging, you get to verify facts. And when you refuse to do that, the lesson isn't just moral, it's expensive. $1.6 million expensive.